I'd always believed I could handle pressure. As the youngest CEO in our company's history, my days were filled with investor meetings, contract negotiations, and impossible deadlines. Mistakes were expensive, and emotions had no place in the boardroom. That was why Claire had become indispensable. She wasn't just my secretary, she was the person who kept my entire life from falling apart. She knew my schedule better than I did, reminded me to eat when I skipped lunch, and somehow anticipated every problem before it landed on my desk. That Monday morning had started like every other. I rushed into the office 10 minutes late, balancing my phone between my shoulder and ear while trying to review a financial report. Claire was already waiting outside my office with a coffee in one hand and a folder in the other. "Good morning," she said with her usual calm smile. "Your 9 o'clock investors arrived early, so I moved your marketing meeting to 11. I also had the legal department revise the merger contract you wanted." "You saved me again," I said, taking the coffee. She smiled modestly. "Just doing my job." I hung up my phone, exhausted after a frustrating conversation with a supplier. My brain was scattered from reading internet jokes during the elevator ride in a desperate attempt to wake myself up. Without thinking, I accepted the coffee, took a sip, and casually said, "Thanks, Mommy." The words echoed through the quiet executive floor. Every conversation stopped. Someone dropped a pen. Even the printer seemed to fall silent. My eyes widened in horror as I realized what I'd just said. Claire stood perfectly still, blinking twice before slowly looking up at me. A rosy blush spread across her cheeks, making her composed expression unexpectedly adorable. "I'm sorry," I blurted out immediately. That came out completely wrong. A junior accountant coughed loudly to hide a laugh, while 2 assistants suddenly became fascinated by the office plants nearby. Claire stared at me for another second before covering her mouth to suppress a smile. "What?" she asked softly. "Did you just call me?" I rubbed the back of my neck, wishing I could disappear. "I swear it wasn't intentional. I saw a stupid meme online before I got here, and apparently my brain forgot how language works." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, instead of laughing at me or making things even more awkward, Claire's smile grew warmer. There was a sparkle in her eyes I had never noticed before, playful, almost affectionate. She leaned just a little closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. Quote. "Say it again." My heart skipped a beat. The embarrassment I'd expected suddenly transformed into something far more confusing, and I realized this accidental slip might change the way I looked at Claire forever. I stared at Claire, convinced I had misheard her. Quote. "Say it again." The words were barely louder than a whisper, yet they echoed in my mind. "What?" I asked, blinking. She quickly looked away, pretending to straighten the folder in her hands. "Nothing," she said with a nervous laugh. Forget I said that. But I couldn't. This was the same Claire who had always been the picture of professionalism. She never flirted, never crossed boundaries, and certainly never teased me in front of the staff. Before I could respond, the elevator doors opened. "Our investors are here," she announced, instantly returning to her calm business persona. "Conference room A. Everyone is waiting." It was as if the awkward moment had never happened. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. Charts filled the screen, financial forecasts were debated, and contracts were reviewed line by line. Normally, I could focus on every detail, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Claire's blushing face. Say it again. Why would she say something like that? Every time I glanced toward the end of the conference table, she was already looking at me. The moment our eyes met, she'd lower hers with the faintest smile before continuing to type her notes. When the investors finally left, they praised our organization. "Your secretary is exceptional," one of them said while shaking my hand. "She's the reason today's presentation ran so smoothly." I nodded. "She deserves most of the credit." Claire smiled politely, though I noticed another hint of pink in her cheeks. The rest of the afternoon was unusually quiet. She brought paperwork into my office several times, but instead of leaving immediately as she normally did, she lingered for a few extra seconds. "Anything else you need?" she'd ask. I'd shake my head. "No, that's everything." She'd smile, almost as if she wanted to say something more, before quietly walking away. Around 6 in the evening, nearly everyone had gone home. Rain tapped gently against the office windows while I finished reviewing quarterly reports. A soft knock interrupted my concentration. Claire stepped inside carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I figured you could use another one. You read my mind." She handed me the cup, and our fingers brushed for the briefest moment. Neither of us pulled away immediately. She looked into my eyes. You know, she said softly, I've worked for you for almost 3 years. I know, and today was the first time you ever looked embarrassed around me. I laughed awkwardly. Trust me, I was beyond embarrassed. To my surprise, she laughed too. I thought it was kind of cute. I nearly dropped my coffee. You did, she nodded. I've seen you negotiate with billionaires without flinching. Watching you panic over one accidental word was surprisingly human. For the first time, we weren't talking like a CEO and his secretary. We were simply two people enjoying each other's company after a long day. Neither of us noticed that the line between professional and personal had begun to blur, and once that line disappeared, there would be no easy way to put it back. The following week arrived faster than either of us expected. Although neither Claire nor I mentioned the awkward nickname again, something between us had quietly changed. It wasn't dramatic enough for anyone else to notice, but I felt it every time she walked into my office. Our conversations became easier. Our smiles lasted a little longer. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me during meetings, and instead of looking away immediately, she'd hold my gaze for a second before returning to her notes. I found myself looking forward to seeing her every morning. That realization made me nervous. Dating someone who worked directly for me was a terrible idea. As CEO, I knew there were professional boundaries for a reason, and I reminded myself of them constantly. Yet no matter how logical I tried to be, my feelings refused to cooperate. Late Thursday afternoon, Claire knocked gently on my office door. Do you have a minute? Of course. She stepped inside carrying a leather folder. The Henderson Group confirmed tomorrow's contract signing in Riverdale. Since it's a 3-hour drive each way, I booked us into a hotel tonight so we'll be fresh for the morning meeting. Good thinking, I replied. She hesitated. There was one small problem. I raised an eyebrow. The city is hosting a music festival this weekend. Almost every hotel is fully booked. Please don't tell me. She gave an apologetic smile. I managed to reserve the last executive suite. That's still good news. It would be, she said carefully, except the hotel only had one suite left. I blinked. One suite, she nodded. 2 separate rooms weren't available. An awkward silence settled between us. Finally, I sighed. We'll make it work. It's only one night. She smiled with obvious relief. I knew you'd say that. The drive to Riverdale was surprisingly enjoyable. We talked about childhood memories, favorite books, terrible office coffee, and places we wanted to visit someday. For the first time, I wasn't talking to my secretary, I was talking to Claire. By the time we reached the hotel, the sky had turned dark. Heavy rain poured over the parking lot as thunder rumbled overhead. Inside, the receptionist handed me a key card with an apologetic smile. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir. The executive suite is all we have left. I thanked her, and Claire and I rode the elevator in complete silence. When the doors opened, we found a beautiful suite overlooking the city. The living room was spacious. The bathroom was luxurious. Then I opened the bedroom door. One king-sized bed. We both froze. Claire slowly looked from the bed to me, trying not to laugh. Well, I rubbed the back of my neck. This is awkward. She folded her arms with a playful smile. You've survived billion-dollar negotiations. I have. You accidentally called me mommy in front of half the office. I'd rather not relive that. Her laughter filled the room. Then she looked into my eyes with the same shy expression she'd worn that morning in the office. So, she whispered, a faint blush returning to her cheeks. If you accidentally say it again tonight. She paused just long enough to make my heart race. I don't think I'd mind.